I figured that there's really one of two reasons why you're here this morning. One, you looked at the information, you read it, and you thought, that sounds intriguing. I'd like to know a little more about what that's describing. The other is, you read the title and thought, I'd like to see what kind of a person actually uses the word ain't in a title for trainers. Now, if you're in that second group, this is it, sorry. But if you're in the first group, let's go ahead and talk about what we came here for. If it works. It was working before, I swear it was. Okay. Now, I'm not a genius. Some others of you in the room I would put in that category. I don't put myself there. Dr. Einstein's in that category, but what we're going to talk about today really doesn't take a genius to figure out. Yet, I've asked him to come along and assist today because he's got some really good words of wisdom that we can use. Apparently, that's just not going to work for me at all. So, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about defining learning. Now, I know, those of you who are here that are in the training profession, you're saying, I don't need you to define for me what learning is. I understand what learning is. Okay, yeah, that may be true. But for the purpose of our presentation today, I want to challenge that just a little bit. And I get to because today I'm standing up here. See? And next month you can stand up here and have your own definition. But for this presentation, I need you to understand where I'm coming from when I say we need to define what learning is a little differently than what we may be at this point. We're also going to talk about what businesses want. And you may be thinking, I got this. Okay, great. That'll be one bullet out of 5 you'll already have down. Okay? But you may be a little bit surprised as to what we talk about there. We're also going to talk about moving the finish line. Okay, there's a lot of talk in the title. I talked about moving the finish line. What does that mean? What's involved with that? Well, I could tell you now, but then that would kind of negate the purpose of having the slides later where we talk about it. We're also going to talk about identifying a pattern. Now, most of you are probably like me. At your desk, you have lots of books, some of which you've read. Many of which you have because that title was really cool, or that's a really good author, and it looks really good sitting on my desk. But if you've actually read them, you read through one and you go, oh, this is really great, some great concepts. Then you read the next one. Oh, now this is really great, some great concepts. And then the next one, and you get to a point where we almost have like this ADD thing going. It's like, okay, I'm going after this thing. Oh, here's something shiny. I'm going to go over there. Oh, now I'm going to go over here. But what I'm going to challenge you today is, it's not so much a matter of this goes here and that goes here and that goes here. This, for me, was the big excitement that actually triggered wanting to do this session. When I took a step back and recognized, you know what? There's a bit of a pattern going on here through all of these things that I'm seeing. So I want to share that with you today as well. And then lastly, I'm going to challenge you to change a little bit. We in training are called change agents. And yet, we are notoriously one of the hardest groups to change. We encourage everybody else to do it, but we like the way we do it. And we know the way we do it is right. So we don't have to change. So I'm not saying you're there personally, but as a group, that's how we tend to be. I look at the heart. I can see the stern looks already. Okay, this is just the agenda slide. Come on. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to try to cover all of that stuff, and we're going to move right along. I've even got notes written out because anyone who's seen me present knows that I can at times drift a little bit off bubble. And so, in an interest of time and making sure everything right gets said, I've written down notes that I may refer to now and again just to make sure I stay on task. All right, let's go to the next one here. First comment that Dr. Einstein has to share with us simply is, the only thing that interferes with my learning is my education. Now, what he's talking about is that difference between what it takes to be a lifelong learner. We oftentimes get stuck in this model of education, that formal, structured approach, that classroom setting. And what he's saying is, the only thing that limits my ability to be a self-sufficient learner is whatever constraints I've had imposed on me in that structured education environment. Now, isn't that a bad thing? Isn't that a shame? But, I was a public school teacher, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of truth in this particular comment here. But it's not just in an education system context, it's in our workplace training context, too. Are we guilty of doing the same thing? Okay? So, the very first thing I want to do, then, is challenge you, what is learning? My contention is, training and learning are different words for a reason. They're not the same term, and they don't refer to the same thing. Let me give you a little bit of what I'm talking about. First of all, here's a fact. Half-life of knowledge is known to be 5 years. Now, this information actually is from Tarot from a few years ago. This number is probably like a year and a half now, or half a year, okay? What this means is, try to picture in your head everything you know right now. All the information that you've gained through life experience. What this says is, in 5 years, half of that is irrelevant and is replaced with something else. Think about that. Think how massive that is. Everything you've gained to this point, half of it is replaced in the next 5 years. That's a lot of information. To attain skilled proficiency, it's estimated it takes at least 1,000 hours of exposure to it. Now, I don't know about you, I don't have any interest in sitting through a class that's 1,000 hours long. I also don't have interest in teaching a class that's 1,000 hours long. And can you imagine the lesson plan for a class that's 1,000 hours long? Okay, that's big. We can't even possibly begin to address that in the context of a classroom situation. But if proficiency is what we want, and that's what we say we want, then are we getting there by teaching based on hours? By counting, well, you sat through a class for an hour, so now you should be proficient. Obviously, that doesn't get us there. So, here's our good friend Ro Crosby, made this comment, and it's stuck with me ever since I heard it, that without a reason to remember it, you will forget 3/4 of what you're listening to right now within the next 24 hours. As brilliant as what I'm sharing with you is, still, if you don't do something with it, if there's not a reason for you to remember it, if there's not something that connects it for you back to reality, back to what you do, something that makes it relevant, then within the next 24 hours, you will not be able to remember most of what you're hearing right now. That's reality. Our brains are wired so that we connect what we're hearing new with what we consider relevant. If it's not relevant, we push it aside to make room for other information that is. That's how we function. Okay, so our training classes, though, tend to focus on pushing a lot of information at people without making those connections. Is that learning? I say no. So, you've probably seen this chart. I think I sold this from Tarot, too. But you've probably seen this chart. This, I just think, is really interesting information. Companies, we hang our hats on training programs. We spend large sums of money on training, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you very much as someone who's employed to do training. But we do large sums of money to do classroom instruction. And for too many leaders, that means we can check off how many people went through training, and we've accomplished that goal. It's done. But consider this. Training and instruction, that classroom context, accounts for 10% of what you know. Now, it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It doesn't mean you can dismiss it, because that's also the foundation. Everything else builds off of that. It's an important 10%, but it's only 10%. That means 80%, 90%, do my math right, 90% of what you know did not come from a classroom. It came from somewhere else. The next bunch, 20%, comes from that coaching, that mentoring, that working with somebody that is an expert, that has knowledge in the topic, that is doing something with that topic that you can lean on, that can help walk you through it. But even at that point, you're not self-sufficient. You're watching somebody else do it. Somebody else is watching you while you do it. You have a safety net. That accounts for 20%, though. That's twice as much as the classroom instruction. But that leaves this really big chunk, okay? The last remaining piece, the last 70%, is on the job practice. Why would this be the biggest piece? This is where you can respond. Huh? That's the 1,000 hours. And that's exactly right. That's how, instead of doing the classroom, that's where it happens. But why would why would that be the biggest chunk? Why is 70% of everything that any individual knows, why is the bulk of it from their personal experience? Why is that the case? That's what's the most relevant. Exactly. Because that's where it matters to me. When we teach in mass, when we paint with a wide brush, we're trying to do one size fits all to everybody, and it doesn't. It's important that each individual has to be able to make that very connection. So, another friend of mine, Lorraine Crawford, makes this comment that without learning, there is no change in behavior. My contention is learning is all of this combined. It's the training that happens in the classroom. It's that coaching, mentoring that happens with an expert. And it's everything you learn from your own personal trial and error. Everything that you attempt and fail, everything you attempt and succeed, everything you gain from that personal interaction with the content, that's part of how you evolve your knowledge base. And that is when you learn. All of that is part of your learning process. Now, anybody disagree? Yeah, see, that's a loaded question. You don't want to,
I don't disagree.
Yes.
I would add to that it's also, once you learn, there's a personal choice to choose.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. In fact, that's a great comment. You're going to see that referenced here in a little bit. Because there is an element of very personal, individual responsibility. You have to want to do these things in order for that process to happen. Very good point. Okay? All right, so what would Dr. Einstein say for us at this point? He would say information is not knowledge. Just having information doesn't mean you know it. It just means you have information. And the only source of knowledge is experience. So, after a typical training program, now, I'm going to give you a little hint. If you look in the bottom corner, you'll see this data is very old, 1992. I'm guessing the number would be way different if it were today. But I don't know that for a fact because I don't have an updated number. I'm using what I got. After a typical training program, what % of participants apply what they learned well enough to improve their on-the-job performance? Not answer some question on their exit quiz as they're leaving the room, but how many were able to take something from that training program and apply it in a way that they change their on-the-job performance? What % do you think? 10? 5, 2?
Wow.
What? 1? Wow, you're like flying all the way down. I expected the numbers would kind of go up a little, but we started at 10 and went, phew! Okay, well, at least in 1992, the numbers were a little bit better than that. It was at 15%, but I do think it'd probably be lower than that if we were doing that now. I agree with that. Whether it be all the way down to 1, I don't know. That's really scary if that is the case, but the reality is, if we have a training program that is only focused on pushing out information, that doesn't make the connection, that doesn't inspire people to make that kind of, I want to do this, then this is the kind of result you get. Even if we accept this number is still valid today, do you know what that means? That means for every training class you do, 85% of the people were there as a waste of time. Because when they left, nothing changed when they got back to their job. What was the point of having them there? What was the point of paying the instructor to do all the work to do it? You only had 15% of the population that it made a difference. That's not a very good rate of return. So, all of that is part of the build-up for everything we're doing here. Here's another way to illustrate this. This is kind of what we sometimes hang our hats on too as trainers. We look at, okay, there's always this group of people who adopt something, and they'll grab onto it. Hey, yeah, all right, we're on board with it, we're doing it. Then you got the other extreme, the people that won't do it if you drag them kicking and screaming. They will never like it. They will always resist. And, you know, there's very little you can do about that. They're just always going to be there. Then you've got the big group in the middle. And we get excited about the group in the middle. Because, because these are the people that we can pull them in. We can do it. But when you look at what it says, these are people that show minimal improvement. Do they show improvement? Yes, but it's minimal. Is that what we wanted? Was that the intent of the training? That we wanted minimal improvement? I don't think so. I think we want the people at this end, which means all of that other stuff, that's called scrap learning. That was garbage. The only ones that it made a difference to were this group of people at this end. That's it. Now, again, is that what you want? Is that what you want your training program noted for? I hope not. Okay? Bless you. So, why do businesses invest in training? What? To improve performance? Get better results. Employee engagement?
They have a meeting every spring.
They have to do something at the meeting they have every spring. You know, there's probably more truth to that than we'd like to admit. Efficiencies?
Change the technology.
Changes in technology?
Retain employees.
Retain employees?
Legal.
Legislative, legal? Okay? Now, as we here in principle began to dig into some of these kind of things, what we came to the conclusion was one of the big reasons that companies invest in training is because we want to be competitive. All of that stuff you said is right. I don't disagree with any of it. But if you lump it all together, what are we talking about? We're talking about a company being competitive. How do you be competitive? You make sure that everything about your company is cutting edge. It can't just be the equipment and the facilities and the products. It's got to be your workforce, your biggest investment. How do you make sure your workforce is cutting edge? You invest in performance improvement. Somebody actually even said improving performance. And who's in charge of performance improvement? Who's in charge of performance improvement? That guy. Now, who's in charge of performance improvement?
All managers have some responsibility.
See, I thought it was going to be a trick question. I thought you were going to say, we are trainers, that's us. But Tom, he's up out of here. Okay, so are trainers responsible for this? We share responsibility for this, but we are not responsible for this. There's not a period after trainer. It's trainer and leader and learner, which goes back to the comment before about that individual responsibility. And that little piece, if you carry nothing else away from what I'm sharing with you this morning, carry that away. Because that is now the core of everything that we're trying to do here at Principal, that we're trying to push out from our development council on out to our business units, is this concept that learning is something that involves all three players. It can't just be shifted, all the burden on one of those individuals. It's got to be all three working together. You're going to see this a couple of different times here before we're done. So, if we invest in performance, we improve that, then we should see the results. Tom, I think you said this is what business wants to see, results. What they want to see is they want to see the profits. They want to see the results. They want to see the business do better. They want to be more competitive. Well, we all nod. I see a lot of people nod. Yeah, that's right. That's what we do. Okay? Now, I'm not going to ask for you. Okay, everyone close your eyes. Okay. In all honesty, can we say our training programs do that? Don't respond, please. Some of you could respond and say, yes, I believe we can measure. We can do that. It's good. And I applaud you for that. It's great. And I'm not saying everybody is bad at this. What I'm saying is I'm trying to challenge us a little bit, to prod us a little. Do our training programs do this? Or do we just share information and hope that by sharing the information, it will improve performance, which will improve results? See the difference? Okay, so, what did I just do? How did I make you push the forward button and go backwards? That was interesting. Okay, push me forward. All right, so, Dr. Einstein at this point might say, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Our training programs, oftentimes, we talk about all the great new things we're doing in training, when in reality, we're not doing anything new in training. We're just teaching new material. The training we're doing is the same way we've always been doing it. We haven't changed anything about what we're doing. We just took out this content piece and we slipped in another module. Everything else about the process remains the same. Okay? And now, shame on us because, as Dr. Einstein says, if we want something to be different than what we've been getting, we have to we have to use different thinking than got us here now. We have to do something a little differently. So, all right. Okay, so, here's how we at Principal are talking about the new finish line. And it's not just us. I guess I shouldn't say that. I think this comes from the Fort Hill folks. If you're familiar with how many of you are familiar with the 6 disciplines of breakthrough learning? All the people from principal, their hands went up. It's good. Okay, good. I was actually kind of afraid that everybody in the room would be going, oh, yeah, we've heard about that. And then it'd be like, okay, let me skip over the next 12 slides or something. It's not that boring. Don't worry. You're all bracing yourselves now like, oh, man. Okay, it's going to go quick. Trust me. So, instruction event, the training event. This is where we traditionally hang our hat. This is what we do. We provide training. People sign up. They come to our training. We deliver the training. They're done with the training. We check it off. They're gone. We move on to the next training project. That's what we do. Boom, boom, boom. We get to the end of the year. How many training sessions did we do? Check, check, check. How many people attended the training sessions? Check, 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 check. Good. We had a great year. Okay? That's the traditional mindset for a training program. What we're saying here internally at Principal is, that's wrong. That's like trying to run a marathon by running the first 12 steps and saying, yeah, I win. You're not even close. You didn't even get close to the finish line. That's not where you stop. There's so much more after that. And here's what we're looking at. Oh, yeah, okay, that animation was kind of pointless. All right, so the next piece here, we're talking that big chunk, that on-the-job learning, that making it relevant, that making it something personal. That's where we see the transfer and the application on the job. We see that deliberate practice. It's not just seat work. It's not just busy work. There's a reason you learned this. There's a reason you need this. Oh, you know, I should have probably told you this earlier on because you're all writing so feverishly. But when I get to the end, I'm going to give you a little website where you can go out, and I've got some other resources that support everything, and my PowerPoint's out there too. So you don't want to draw the little pictures and stuff. You know, you can still go ahead and take notes if you'd like, but I'm just telling you, you'll get the whole thing if you want it, you know, later. Let's let you know. All right, so as I was saying, this stage is where the behavior change takes place. Behavior change is a very personal, individual thing. But it has to happen for the learning to occur. Remember what Lorraine said on the slide earlier, that change is not possible without the behavior change. You can't have the learning process without that change of behavior. So, we're looking at how do we do more to maximize this piece, the transfer and application, because that's where the meat is. And then that leads us to improved workplace results, which is where the business needs us to be. That's where the business outcomes are measured, not just the learning outcomes, but the business outcomes. That's where our new finish line needs to be. That's when we know we've completed the learning task, not just the training project. Now, let's just be honest. What's one really big problem with this scenario? You may all be going, "Oh, that's cool. I like that. It's exciting." But what can you immediately spot as one big problem with this?
We don't have total control or influence over the transfer and application.
Okay. Yeah. What level are we as a trainer then held accountable for this process, because we don't have total control over what happens here? Theoretically, we have total control of the training event, but we don't have total control once they leave the training event. So that's legitimate. What else? That's another hand.
Proof.
Okay, proof. How do we prove? And even if there is business, even if we have improved workplace results, how do we prove now, this long after the training event, that it connects back to what we trained?
That's best.
Okay?
Document causality, but document proof.
Yep. So document can be extremely tough to prove. Okay? What else? Yes?
Preparation for the training event.
Okay?
Taking into account what you have, you're going to let people in the room.
Yep.
You have them there at the right time, because can they apply it? Because if they can't apply it right away,
Yep.
then
Because with at least what you're seeing here, it looks like we're still starting just at the training event, and then we're building everything off of there. So we need to be thinking what happens before the training event, too. I agree 100%. Hold on to that thought, too. Yes, ma'am.
in concept of just-in-time training, are all the learners getting it just in time for them to apply it back to the job immediately for that test transfer?
Okay, so if you're getting training, if we're talking about you have to apply it, you have to do something with it right away. If you get it at a time where you're learning something new but you can't apply it right away, Even if it was something you really needed, because you didn't apply it right away, by the time you need it, it may be gone. And then that throws this whole system off. All right, yep.
How do you know if they need it?
How do you know if they need it? Okay. Buy-in from managers. We said leaders had to be part of this, remember? The 3 groups. Yeah. Okay. How do we know the leaders support it? Dennis?
We don't have any control on how or what they're measuring, and that may change from the original scope of the training content.
We don't have any, or we have at least very minimal control, perhaps, over what is being measured, especially when we're talking about getting down here to the business outcomes. Okay, Jill?
You have factors too. You want them to transfer and apply after they're done with training. Can you do it? How do you measure that?
Okay, so we can measure they attended the training. We can even measure what they maybe know. We can do a pre and post test, so we can say what they didn't know after the training. But how do we measure the application? We're saying it's a big deal, but how do we measure that the application is sufficient, that it's happening? Yes, sir.
The amount of time it takes to make that determination of workplace performance doesn't generally fit with the short-term goals of businesses. You're talking, an entire business year, multiple quarters, multiple years, whether or not you're improving your overall workplace performance. And management must say, how do we improve this quarter?
Yep. Do we have like a prize or anything? Because I like this guy. He gives all the great answers. Yeah. Again, everything that's shared, I agree. Everything. All of those are all challenges, and some of them you're going to see addressed as I continue through some other pieces here. But time becomes the biggest enemy of all. All of that other stuff can be worked out eventually if you have the time to do it. But for many businesses, that's not the conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is, okay, we have this new thing happening, we need to do training. They may even say we need to do a 1 or 2 hour training, and they may give you parameters. We need to do a training, we need this to happen, it needs to happen within this time parameter, and then that's done because we got this other project coming up, that's reality. That's where we are. And so then to lay out a model like this, not only are we talking about obligating the time of trainers, we're also talking about obligating the time of the trainee. We're talking about obligating the time of the leader on an extended basis after a training event is completed. You see where there might be some resistance to that? I would. If I was a leader and didn't understand this, I would resist. So, and I'm not saying it's bad for that reason. I'm just saying we need to be thinking like our leaders do, like our business people do, so that we can communicate with them. We need to understand, just because we might find this exciting, they may not. And we need to be able to talk their language to explain to them why it is. Speaking of which, let me walk you through then what we've put together here. Go ahead. The ADDIE model. Go ahead and hit the button there. You're probably familiar with the ADDIE model. It's been around for decades. We've used it to build great, wonderful resources. And here's what we have for the ADDIE model. We have our analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. We've used it. It's sound, it's structured, and I have absolutely no problem with it. And in principle, we still use it. It's still our foundation bedrock. Here's the limitation of ADDIE. It is intended to develop content. Develop and review, refresh content. That's what it's about. Not that it's bad, but that's what it's designed for. It is designed for content development. We as workplace learning performance professionals need to be thinking beyond just developing the content for a training class. If we're to do those things on that time scale I just showed you, we have to think broader than that concept. And that's why here at Principal, when our development council got wind of the 6 Ds, we said, oh, here's something interesting. We learned about the 6 Ds learning framework, and here's what it looks like. Now you'll notice immediately there is some synergy, seems like some direct overlap, some direct connections between the 6 Ds and the ADDIE model, especially at the beginning and the end. I mean, it looks like there's you can just draw lines straight down, but it doesn't align exactly. Now, 6D is not a replacement for ADDIE. Now, some might think that it is. We didn't. We looked at it and we said, you know what? This is not a replacement for ADDIE. This is a complement for ADDIE. This is something that locks nicely together with ADDIE. Because while ADDIE focuses on content development for the purpose of delivering good content, the 6 Ds D's focus on business outcome, developing learning that supports the business. The ADDIE model pieces fit within the 6 Ds, and we created what we called ADDIE on steroids, because we were able to beef that up and build an ADDIE model that said, here's ADDIE that acknowledges the business. Now, do you think business leaders would find that interesting to know? Yeah, because it acknowledges we understand and respect what they have to do. Okay? So, let me walk you through, my friends, the 6 Ds, because you're familiar with ADDIE, so here we go. Real quickly, the 6 Ds. D number 1 is define the business outcomes. This sounds a lot like analyze, ask those upfront questions. Somebody even said, we don't know, we didn't do upfront questions, we don't know what those things are. This is where we ask those questions. But instead of just, what are the learning outcomes? Blah, blah, blah. Not that those are bad things. In the D1 says, what are the business outcomes? What are the business objectives we're trying to accomplish here? What can we link to in the business side, in their lingo, that helps us be able to validate that? D2 talks about designing for that complete experience. And I was trying to remember who it was. Somebody over here was saying about before the training. There you are. And that's what this one talks about. D2 talks about designing for the complete experience. Don't design a training class. Design a learning process in which you start working with the trainee and the leader before the training event. You continue to work with them during the training event and after the training event. That the trainer continues to provide support in all of those, but that you're planning for those to all be intentional stages, not just, oh, you know what would be good? Let's do something before class. No, there's a purpose for it. It's part of the plan. That's what D2 talks about. D3 talks about delivering for application. This is where a lot of what we've talked about this morning. We talked about this, that it has to be relevant. It has to connect at an individual level. I have to be able to understand this is what it means to me. That's where D3 comes in. Planning for that, thinking, here's the content, great, but what does it mean to the students? How do I make it relevant to them? Okay? D4 then talks about driving follow-through. And this is where we really get into the meaty stuff. Because again, this is where we get into, 10%, 20%, 30%, or 70%. My math is really shoddy today. Okay? This is where we get into the 70%, the follow-through, the what happens with that knowledge after they've walked out the door with it. The learner, according to Discipline 4, D4, the learner reports progress to the trainer and to the leader. The leader asks what was learned, has dialogue in one-on-one meetings with the trainee, has follow-up with it. There's an element of accountability in that as well. But it's the leader asking the trainee, what did you learn? In your own words, tell me, what did you learn? What did it benefit you? So there's that connection that's caused within that trainee's mind as well. Reinforces, I really did learn something. The leader also follows up on application. If applying things is such a big deal, then who's making sure they're actually applying it? Someone said, well, it's hard to measure. I think dentists, it's hard to measure application. This doesn't necessarily answer that question, but it's an avenue of that. It's the leader providing that support. And the leader also rewards results because the leader's been involved since before the training, during the training, and the follow-through. The leader now can identify, congratulations, you've achieved, and acknowledges that. And we just did an internal survey with a part of our team here within Principal, my immediate area. Now, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things when it comes to recognition that they cited was sincerity, and it comes from a leader. Okay? So when the leader is saying, I sincerely like what you did, and they can say, because I watched all this, that matters to people. Okay? So, behind all of this is still the trainer, providing support for both of those individuals. So, all three still active in this process. D5, this is that continued support, that ongoing effort, and here, of course, as we were talking about, here's now where we're getting into the weeds, because we're way after the training event now. Does your culture support you providing the support? Lead Leader continues to ask, what do you need from me to help you as a learner? Learner shares their best practices with other learners, with their peers. This is now what I've evolved, what I've learned. And the trainer continues to provide job aids, refreshers, how-to guides to assist the leader in having those discussions, to assist the trainee in continuing to evolve their skills. The trainer hasn't just said, okay, class is done, have a nice day, on your way. The trainer is still there providing support after the fact. That's a huge investment of time. I'm not saying this is easy. But there's a question, do we want to achieve our goals or do we want to do it easy? We can't necessarily have it both ways. And then lastly, D6, this is where we get to document results. This is where we come full circle, and just like the ADDIE model, we say that the evaluation process should be easy if you did an effective job of analyzing up front, because you're just measuring, did you accomplish what you said you wanted to. The 6Ds do the same thing. The big question is, we said way back in D1, this is the business outcomes we want to align to. In D6, can we say we did it? That's where we get to. Okay? So that's the 6Ds. Any questions about those specifically before I move into our last little pieces here? Yes?
Well, I have one question. I think it was about D4.
Okay.
Where it had the blocks of
Yep.
the leadership, the leader involvement. As you introduce this and put this before leaders, what has their response been? Has their immediate thought been, wow, I have a lot of work with this?
Yes.
And has there been pushback against that?
Well, I will give you two responses because I can tell you from my own immediate area, but I acknowledge that that's a little weird. No, not weird. It's a little different. It's not the norm maybe for other areas. And so I'll tell you a response I've got from two different areas. In my immediate area, the response was initially, sounds like you're asking us to do a lot more stuff. But fortunately, the leadership, the high-level leadership within our area has been putting greater emphasis on, we got to make sure that our professional development of our people is a priority. And as the leader, you need to be having these discussions with them. And so what the burden on us was, if we can provide the tools to make it easy and efficient for that leader to have these discussions, to be involved in these ways, so they're not having to create it on their own, that we're giving them a framework or a structure they can work within, then our leaders were okay with that. Our area even went a step farther. This year, for the first time, we actually have built into the leader goals for the year. One of their goals directly relates to their engagement with their employees' professional development. So, again, my area is a little unique, maybe in that sense. Another area I visited with, they went right there. That was exactly where they went. I don't have time to have all these discussions, and I wouldn't say that's necessarily completely resolved yet, but my response was, well, I can appreciate that. We'll provide you these resources, we'll provide you these tools, and ultimately, would you rather spend the time talking about the professional development options in this context, or would you rather spend the time dealing with performance issues? Which is a more effective use of your time? And, in that context, obviously no leader is going to say, well, I prefer the other, But it's still a sales pitch. There is a sales pitch in this. But the real key is making it as easy as possible for them, giving them the resources so you're not just saying, we expect you to do this. It's like an unfunded mandate. We expect you to do this, but we're not going to give you any support to do it. Okay? So as long as you support them, they at least are willing to listen. Yeah?
Is it fair to say that if you interact with 10 leaders, that at least one of them is going to say, I get it, and thanks for the support, I'd like to do that?
I'm sorry, if you talk to at least 10 leaders.
If you talk to 10 leaders and you're introducing this model, is it fair to say that at least one of them will say, I'm on board?
Oh yeah.
And I'd like to contribute.
Yeah.
And then, if this is realized, then the performance in their department will be markedly different on some level. And so, isn't there a need to kind of ramp up the wheel?
Oh, you mean tell the success story and want to build upon those successes?
And create the short-term.
Yeah. Actually, that is very good, and that's part of D6 as well. I kind of trimmed a little bit for our benefit today, but part of D6 talks about then taking the successes and building on those to spread that even farther, because it's one thing for we here at Prince, we have what we call the learning and development community. That's what we've created. It's for all of the training people throughout the organization. That's we're a community. And now, it's not everybody's not part of one same reporting structure. We all report different parts of the company, but we've pulled the people together as a community so we can share resources and ideas. And it's one thing for within that community, people to get excited about this. Another thing for business leaders that we're partnering with, that we're supporting for training, to buy into this. Because, you know, it's a different way to approach it. Yeah.
And sometimes when we're trying to lead change, it's an all or nothing equation, and they can be very debilitating. But if we look at it from the perspective of the one or two that got on board, and over time you do see an increase in performance, then that becomes the argument, as opposed to you trying to bring forward a theory.
And I will tell you that one of the no, that's a great question. That we need to make sure that what we're doing is communicated, and that we use those examples to be able to see other successes. In principle, we also do an employee satisfaction survey every year, and I'm sure most companies do. And some of the questions on there deal specifically with training and development and what resources are offered to you. And the scores in our area, as we've been doing more of these concepts, in fact, we started doing some of these concepts in our immediate area before we knew what they were called. We kind of swerved into some of them, but then we were like, oh, this is great. Now we got a little more structure, we do this. But we started doing those things, and then we said, oh, you know what? All right, well, let's put these in here. And we watched those EOS scores continue to improve as people responded very positively, feeling like the strength of what they're receiving for training is really solid. To the point now that I know that one of the leaders in my area has someone from the corporate HR folks wanting to come talk with her about how is it that your leaders get such high satisfaction scores, and how is it that training is so high? You know, what are you doing here that's, you know, so great? Well, part of it is this. Okay. Denny, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm with the principal as well. So what you're saying is actually confirming a couple things that we're doing. One of the things we're bringing in Andy Jefferson, who's one of the co-authors of this whole 6 disciplines, in to speak to business leaders. And the focus is really going to be that it really just takes 15 minutes. So that kind of speaks to the question you've got. Are leaders going to push back and say, I don't have time for this? And we're really saying, honestly, it's about 15 minutes. If you spend 5 minutes saying, hey, I know you're going to be going through this training, what do you hope to get out of it? Let me share a little bit about how I see this applying to what you're doing. After they do it, tell me what you learned. 5 minutes there. After that, how can I help you out? What support do you need? How can I follow up with that? So we're saying, honestly, it's about 15 minutes. The other thing that's encouraging is kind of the comment that you're saying. You've all heard of the 80-20. We're kind of flipping it around because we are going through a change process. And so we're saying, let's think of 20-80. If we can get 20% of our business leaders on board with this, once we then have some of the success stories, we can share those, and it's going to kind of pull along their peers to go, oh, I see how that's working for you. Maybe I do need to do that.
Dan.
Well, could you speak to the initiative that's acquired by those of us in the training and development profession to take the steps that we need to do this? You made a point early on about the obstacles that we all face, our traditional view of learning and performance improvement. So what initiative, can you speak to the initiative that each of the risks that we have to take to push some of this stuff through?
Well, first of all, I would say that before anyone can even step out and take the risk, you have to be able to show that you are not just there pushing your training agenda. I was saying before, this is a sales pitch, and you have to be able to talk the language of the people you're talking to. You have to be able to demonstrate that you're there to support them, that what you're unveiling is something that's actually designed to help them. It's not something you're doing to make your life easier. In fact, this doesn't make our life easier. I mean, what I've described here is not making training easy. In fact, it makes it more cumbersome because we have to keep track of a lot more stuff now. But we've discovered it's more effective. And that's the message then. That's how that happens. Now, what it requires is you have to, at least what we've discovered is you have to try to find the leaders who initially are the most receptive to considering that. You don't go to the leader that says, we've done it this way since 1950. I'm not, it's worked. That's not the leader you start this with. Okay? You start this with a leader who says, we'd like to try something new. There may be a little, look for the leader that has some books on their desk. They may recognize those authors. You go, hey, because that's the kind of individual that you can crack in with a little bit and you can begin that sales pitch with. But what really becomes at least for us, at least here in principal, what's really been the way that we've been starting to work it in is exactly what she was talking about, was finding a success story here, finding a success story here. Let me clarify. I keep talking about selling it to the business side. We had to still sell it to our own training community. And in selling it to our training community, we have these large group meetings 2 or 3 times a year, and we would bring in training people and leaders where we had the success stories to tell them to the training people to say, this is why you should be excited about this. This is why, if you're not already on board, you should be on board with this, because look what's already happening. Okay, and so, I mean, off the cuff, that would be my response, is it has to be, you have to find that easy, not easy target, but that receptive target, and then start a sales pitch with that. And in fact, speaking of the books, I want to share with you, because we're running short on time, and it's a great question. I love the discussion, but I'm gonna leapfrog ahead here real quick to I really want to show you this pattern, because remember I started and said this was the exciting thing. Okay, so it's self-serving. All right, this is what got me excited to do the presentation. I'm gonna share it. All right. I hope that you will actually appreciate this. Now, just so you know, and again, you can go and get the PowerPoint afterwards, what I've skipped over is, I'm going to show you 5 different books here. What I've skipped over is some slides that give a little more detail about what's in those different books, a little summary about them. So I'd encourage you to go look at the PowerPoint, because I think it is good stuff. I think it's, well, of course I think it's good stuff. I put it in there. But I think you'll get the point of what I was getting at just with this one here. So first of all, we've talked about the 6 disciplines of breakthrough learning, okay? That's the one right there on top. It just looks different. That's the workbook. This is the hardcover book. So we've talked about the 6 disciplines of breakthrough learning. Oh, you know what? I need my notes page for this. This is one of those times where I sat down and had this brilliant thinking process and knew I'd never remember it when I stood in front of you. But here's what, when I took a step back, here's what I saw these elements of literature, these things that sit on our desks, here's what I saw them saying. The 6 Ds are about tell us that learning is about applied experience that is relevant to the individual trainee. So the 6 Ds are talking about those business outcomes by making it relevant to the trainee through applied experience. Okay? The next one, you're familiar with the Kirkpatrick model, the 4 levels of evaluation. Did you know that they recently revitalized it? Wendy Kirkpatrick was here in Des Moines. We were fortunate to have her come in last November and present the chapter, not the principal, the Central Iowa chapter, had her come in, and they've changed it. Huge emphasis now is on level 3, the behavior level. And one of the big things they've changed, and this was on the slide you didn't get to see, sorry. One of the big things they've changed is they've added this circle around it that has these 4 areas that they call reinforcers. I think I need the slide now. But they have these 4 areas around it that are the leader's responsibility to make sure the learner is doing to reinforce those behavior changes. And they also have added this nice big colored box behind level 3 and 4 that talks about monitoring and providing support to the leader and the learner. And that's responsibility of the trainer. Thank you. You're all ready to go anyway. All right. That's the responsibility of the trainer. And where have you heard that before? Well, earlier in the presentation. Thank you. Okay, I'm glad you're paying attention. All right. But so the Kirkpatrick folks, they're telling us now that successful learning involves the leader ensuring that application. Then we get to Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink, the Central Iowa chapter, was fortunate to partner with the Des Moines Partnership and Drake University to bring him to town last December. And what he talked about to us was individual motivations drive success, both on an individual and a group or business level. It's that individual interest in success that will drive whether your group, your training team, for example, or your business group is successful. That's what I get from Daniel Pink. Then we have Marcus Buckingham, the nearest thing to a rock star our industry has. Now, Marcus Buckingham, what's his big claim to fame? That he talks about, don't dwell on the things you can't do, focus on the things you can. Okay, that seems to make sense to me. In this context, though, here's what I get from him. Success can only happen when we focus on where our individual strengths are. There's still that individual focus. And then lastly, we have the influencer books. How many of you have this one on your desk? Okay? This book is all about motivations, which foster that individual behavior change, because it says those are the key drivers to success. Okay, now, I'm just asking, do you see a trend there somewhere in all these books? Okay? Here's the challenge I got. I mean, I'm sitting back looking at this going, ooh, this makes me all tingly. Ooh, okay? Now, and then I think, all right, so if there's a synergy here, if there's like this concept that's encompassing all of these, what is that saying to me? And this is the message, at least, that I walked away from, and I would challenge you with. What are you doing to equip today's trainees to be successful with tomorrow's goals? Or are we just training them for today? All of these are talking about not just a successful training program, but successful individuals. Okay? Here's the typical approach we take. This is a great cartoon if you haven't seen it. You know, we like to think, you know, in big terms. Here's the course. Somehow we'll get to the results. We're not quite sure. It'll happen somehow. Generally, you know, a miracle occurs somewhere in the middle. And we probably need to be a little more specific there. What we're trying to do then, Dr. Einstein has a quote about miracles. You can read later. Go on. Here's what we're trying to do. Don't wait for the miracle. Make it happen. Understand that learning gives a competitive advantage. See learning as a process. It's like any other business process. It doesn't just start and abruptly stop. There's a process. See the learning as a process. Look to improve all learning programs by linking to business outcomes. Spell out what the participants, the individuals will do different. Have measures of success. Allow time for goal setting. And account for ongoing support from leaders, peers, and trainers. And make it very clear that leaders play a critical role in the success of learning. Okay? Now, if you say, we already do all that stuff, then I'm going to say, yes. I also attempt to say, you liar. But you might be telling the truth. Okay? All right? And lastly, the all-time favorite Dr. Einstein quote, and it really does apply. Insanity means doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. Okay? If we want something different, if we want to make a change, then we have to do it differently in order to get something different. You keep doing the same stuff over and over, you're going to get the same stuff. And if you expect any different, according to Dr. Einstein, you're insane. Okay? So, again, it doesn't take a genius, at least in my opinion, otherwise I wouldn't be up here. Training ain't learning. Yes, I said ain't again. Businesses want results. They want business results. Finish line must be moved. Don't ignore the pattern. And just make change happen. Don't wait for it to happen. Make it happen. Do something about it. So then, here's the website I promised you. More and more people would like to get that information so they can look up information and stuff. So anyway, here's this website where the PowerPoint is. There's some other resources, individual resources that flesh out some additional content about each of the 5 book topics that are there. A couple other web links to some stuff, just for your interest. So, anyway, that's it. Thank you. I'm sorry we went just a wee bit long, but boy, you had some great discussion. But thank you very much.